The human fleet floated quietly in the blackness of space, its silver ships glinting under the distant stars. Commander Eric stood on the bridge of the flagship, eyes fixed on the holographic screen before him. The calm in space felt strange, almost like the eye of a storm. 4 days, they had monitored enemy movements, yet nothing had happened. It was too quiet, and that made Eric uneasy. "Captain, sensors are picking up an energy signature at the edge of our system," Lieutenant Mara said, her voice tense. The small blue dot on the screen blinked faintly, moving closer. "Unknown type?" Eric asked, his jaw tight. "Yes, sir. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's erratic." Mara's hands hovered over the controls, ready to respond at a moment's notice. Eric's mind raced. The human fleet was strong, but the galaxy was vast, and enemies were always watching. He knew that even a small mistake could cost billions of lives. "Prepare all ships for full alert," he ordered. "I want shields at maximum and weapons ready. Notify all stations. This could be the moment we've feared." In the observation deck, crew members exchanged nervous glances. The room buzzed with whispered speculation. Nobody wanted to speak too loudly. Fear hung in the air like static. Suddenly, the energy signature blinked out. One moment it was there, the next gone. "What happened?" Mara whispered, unable to hide the shock. "Could be a sensor glitch," Eric said, though his voice lacked conviction. Deep inside, he felt a cold warning. Enemy ships never just disappeared. Something was coming, and it would not be small. Minutes stretched like hours as the fleet waited. Then, without warning, the enemy appeared. Ships larger than human imagination had predicted materialized out of nowhere, surrounding human positions like a predator closing in on prey. Explosions rocked the outer stations as the enemy fired without hesitation. "Shields holding!" shouted a junior officer, but the relief was short-lived. The enemy's firepower was overwhelming. One by one, human outposts flared and vanished in brilliant bursts of light. Eric gritted his teeth. "Form defensive rings around the main fleet. Engage the enemy, but hold position. No ship moves out of formation." His voice was firm, calm, but inside, his heart raced. The humans had trained for this, but nothing could truly prepare anyone for the sight of hundreds of enemy warships descending from the darkness. As lasers streaked across the void, a smaller human vessel was hit. Crew members screamed, and alarms blared. The bridge shook violently. Eric steadied himself against the console. "Evacuate the crew, launch emergency pods," he barked. Amid the chaos, Lieutenant Mara noticed something strange. A brief flicker in the enemy formation, like a moment of hesitation. She pointed at the screen. "Sir, look. There's a pattern. They're ships." "They're not invincible," Eric interrupted, understanding instantly. The humans were always clever when survival was on the line. They had learned to fight with minds sharper than weapons. "Target the weakest points. Use the new phase disruptor on my mark." A shiver ran through the crew as the order spread. Phase disruptors were untested, dangerous devices, but desperation left no room for fear. Eric knew that if this worked, they could turn the tide of battle. If it failed, everyone would die. Time slowed as the fleet moved into position. Human ships, though smaller, were agile and well-coordinated. They darted between enemy lines, weaving like predators among the giants. With precise timing, the phase disruptors fired, and enemy shields flickered. For a brief, shining moment, humans had the upper hand. Explosions rocked the battlefield as enemy ships began to falter. The crew cheered, but Eric didn't allow himself to relax. He scanned the stars, searching for more threats. The enemy was cunning, and victory could be an illusion. In the chaos, a warning light flashed on the main console. Mara's voice cut through the roar. "Commander, multiple enemy vessels are heading directly for Earth. They bypassed the outer defenses." Eric's stomach sank. "All units, intercept. Do not let them reach home. Every ship, every fighter, move now." The fleet surged forward, weaving through debris and energy blasts. Humans had no choice but to fight with every ounce of courage and skill. For every ship that fell, others pressed forward, relentless, determined. Humanity had survived for millennia by never giving up, and they would not give up now. Eric looked out at the stars, his face pale but determined. The Warzone had shattered, but humanity's fleet was far from broken. And though the enemy was fierce, Eric knew one truth: humans would find a way to win, no matter the cost. Above the bridge, the stars burned cold and distant, silent witnesses to the courage of a species that refused to bow. Somewhere in the darkness, the enemy waited, unaware that humanity was already planning its next move. And in that moment, suspense and hope collided, leaving the crew ready for whatever came next. The human fleet surged through space, engines blazing, following the enemy vessels racing toward Earth. Commander Eric gripped the rail on the bridge, eyes fixed on the holographic display. Every ship in the fleet moved like a single organism, a river of silver against the dark canvas of space. The crew worked in perfect rhythm, yet tension hung heavier than the vacuum around them. "Enemy approaching the Sol perimeter at full speed," Lieutenant Mara reported. Her voice trembled slightly, but her hands were steady over the controls. "They're faster than predicted." Eric clenched his jaw. "All units, prepare for engagement. Remember your training. Focus on defense, but watch for any chance to strike." Even as the humans moved, the enemy struck first. Massive energy beams lit the void, carving fiery paths toward human ships. Alarms blared across the fleet as smaller vessels were shredded in seconds. Explosions flared like dying stars. "Shields at 70%, shouted a junior officer. The fleet was holding, barely, but the strain was clear. Human ships, though skillful, were outnumbered. Each hit forced crews to react instantly, patching shields, rerouting power, firing back with precision. Eric's mind raced. He knew brute force alone would not win this battle. The humans had something the enemy didn't: strategy, cunning, and an unpredictable will to survive. "Phase disruptors ready," Mara said. Her voice was steady now, tinged with excitement. "We can hit them where it hurts, but timing is critical." Eric nodded. "Wait for my command. We hit together, all at once." He scanned the fleet, seeing fear and determination reflected in every face. Human courage had always been strongest in the darkest moments. The first wave of enemy fighters tried to flank the human vessels, darting in and out with terrifying speed. Smaller human ships intercepted them, weaving through debris and laser fire. Sparks of destruction lit up the blackness. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the flagship. One of the larger enemy ships had fired a concentrated blast, nearly destroying a human destroyer. Crew members screamed and braced for impact. Eric's heart pounded. If one flagship could nearly obliterate a destroyer, what chance did smaller ships have? "Now!" Eric yelled. Phase disruptors fired. Bright streaks of energy tore through enemy shields, destabilizing their formations. Human ships surged forward, exploiting the chaos. The enemy faltered, unprepared for the humans' clever tactic. Explosions lit up space as the first enemy ships were destroyed without warning. The bridge erupted with shouts and alarms, but Eric kept calm. "Maintain formation. Do not overextend. We hit, then pull back." His orders were clear, precise. The fleet moved like a living organism, striking and retreating, keeping the enemy off balance. In the midst of battle, Mara noticed a larger pattern. "Sir, they're focusing on our perimeter defenses, ignoring some of our smaller units. They think we're weak there." Eric's eyes narrowed. "That's our chance. Send the second wave to flank from the right. Surprise is our advantage, always." The fleet split, smaller squadrons darting like silver knives around the enemy. Lasers sliced through the void, explosions blossomed like fiery flowers. The humans were relentless, adapting faster than the enemy could react. As the battle raged, Eric watched a younger officer, barely 19, guide his fighter with deadly precision. A small smile crossed Eric's face. Humans were fragile, yes, but they had an unbreakable spirit. That spirit was more dangerous than any weapon. Enemy ships began to falter under the human counterattack. Their formations broke, confusion spreading across their fleet. Eric saw it and seized the moment. Full offensive. Push forward. No mercy. The humans struck with everything they had. One by one, enemy vessels exploded, their debris scattering across the black expanse. The tide was turning. The fleet that seemed on the verge of destruction was now dominating, though at great cost. "Commander, we're taking heavy losses, but the enemy is retreating," Mara reported. Eric allowed himself a brief nod. "Good. Keep pressure. Do not let them regroup. We finish this wave, then regroup for the next strike." Even in victory, the cost was clear. Ships were burning, crews injured or lost, alarms still blaring. But humanity had survived, striking back with courage, intelligence, and unwavering determination. In the quiet moments between explosions, Eric looked out at the stars. The enemy had been stopped, for now. But he knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, the enemy waited, wounded but alive, and the humans would have to be ready for whatever came next. The fleet pressed forward, engines glowing, a river of determination against the void. Commander Eric stood tall, eyes fixed on the horizon. Humanity had survived the first strike. They had fought back. And soon, they would prove that no enemy could underestimate them again. The battlefield was quiet for the first time in hours, but the calm felt dangerous. Commander Eric knew better than to trust silence. The human fleet floated among scattered debris, the remains of enemy ships burning slowly. Many of the human vessels were damaged, some barely holding together, but the fleet was still alive, and that was all that mattered. "Sir, we're picking up unusual readings from our sensors," Lieutenant Mara said, pointing at the holographic display. Her fingers hovered, unsure. "The enemy ships, their shields are flickering in certain patterns. I think we've found a weakness." Eric leaned closer, his mind racing. "Explain." "It's hard to describe," Mara admitted. "But our new phase disruptors are affecting them. The shields aren't holding consistently. If we time our attacks just right, we can bypass their defenses completely." Eric's eyes narrowed. This was the moment humans had been waiting for. Though smaller and fewer, they had intelligence, creativity, and determination, qualities the enemy underestimated. "Get me full tactical simulations. We need to know exactly how to use this." The crew worked tirelessly, running calculations and projections. The ships maneuvered carefully, waiting for the next enemy wave. As the minutes ticked by, tension grew. Every officer knew that if the enemy returned stronger, the fleet could be destroyed in moments. Then, without warning, the enemy appeared again. Ships materialized from the darkness, moving in formation, ready to attack Earth. But this time, humans were ready. Eric gave the order, "Phase disruptors, target the weakest points. All ships, focus fire. Strike together." Bright beams of energy shot out, hitting enemy shields precisely where Mara had calculated. Explosions blossomed across the battlefield. Enemy vessels faltered, their formations breaking apart. Humans who had moments before been on the defensive were now in control. "Shields down on 3 enemy cruisers," a crew member shouted. Small human fighters darted in, firing concentrated blasts. One by one, enemy ships were destroyed without warning. The larger human vessels moved strategically, each one coordinating attacks with deadly precision. Eric felt a surge of pride. Humans were never the largest, the strongest, or the fastest, but ingenuity and courage had always been their greatest weapons. Even now, surrounded by destruction and danger, the fleet was proving that humans could turn the tide against impossible odds. Amid the chaos, Mara noticed something else. "Sir, the enemy is retreating in confusion. They didn't expect this level of coordination." "Good," Eric said, his voice calm but firm. "We finish this quickly. Push forward, but keep formation. Do not get distracted. The human fleet moved like a single organism, flowing between the enemy ships, striking where the shields were weakest. Explosions lit up space in brilliant flashes. Some ships were lost, some severely damaged, but humanity's determination burned brighter than any laser. During the battle, Eric caught sight of a small squadron of human fighters weaving through enemy lines. One young pilot, barely 18, took down 2 enemy ships before a larger cruiser noticed him. He barely escaped, but his bravery inspired everyone watching. Humans are incredible, Eric muttered to himself. Even in the face of death, they fight smarter and braver than anyone expects. The enemy fleet tried to regroup, but it was too late. Their formation was broken, their shields unstable, and their morale shaken. Humans pressed the attack, showing no mercy, taking advantage of every opportunity. "Sir, enemy flagship is vulnerable," Mara reported. "If we hit now, we can force them to retreat completely." Eric nodded. "Do it. Full power, all ships. Strike together." The fleet surged forward, firing with deadly accuracy. The enemy flagship shook violently, its defenses failing. Explosions tore through its hull, and finally, it broke apart in a dazzling display of fire and metal. The remaining enemy vessels scattered, fleeing into the darkness of space. The human fleet held its ground, battered but victorious. Silence returned once more, but this time it felt different. Humans had survived. They had fought back. They had turned what seemed like certain defeat into a stunning victory. Eric looked out at the stars, his mind already thinking ahead. The enemy had weaknesses, and humans had discovered them. But he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, in the dark reaches of space, new threats waited. Humans had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The crew cheered quietly, relief and pride mixing with exhaustion. Ships needed repairs, and lives had been lost, but humanity had shown its strength. They were small, but they were clever. They were fragile, but they were unbreakable. Commander Eric took a deep breath. "Prepare for the next phase. We've proven we can fight, but now we need to plan. The enemy will not give up easily. And neither will we." Above them, the stars shone cold and distant, silent witnesses to the courage, intelligence, and unyielding spirit of humanity. For the first time in this battle, humans were no longer just survivors, they were the hunters. The human fleet had won the last battle, but Commander Eric knew victory was never permanent. Enemy forces were scattered, but dangerous. Intelligence reports suggested a secret weapon or plan the enemy had been hiding. Humanity could not afford to wait for another surprise attack. "Sir, we have a chance to strike at the enemy's rear positions," Lieutenant Mara said, pointing to the holographic map. "A small station, lightly defended. If we take it, we might uncover their plans." Eric nodded. "Good. Assemble a covert team. We move quietly, strike hard, and get out. No heroics beyond the mission. Lives matter." The covert team was small but elite. Each member had trained for years, prepared for the deadliest missions. The team boarded sleek, fast ships, designed to slip past enemy sensors. Eric watched them leave, tension gripping his chest. Humanity had survived battles before, but this was different. They would be deep behind enemy lines, with no backup if anything went wrong. The journey was silent, the stars stretching endlessly. Every crew member held their breath, aware that a single mistake could mean annihilation. Mara piloted their lead ship, guiding them through narrow asteroid fields and sensor arrays, her focus absolute. Suddenly, the enemy appeared. A patrol of sleek fighters moved toward the team, scanning for intruders. Mara's fingers danced over the controls. "Engage cloaking. We move behind them." The ships shimmered and became nearly invisible, slipping past the patrol as if they weren't there. The team reached the enemy station. It floated cold and lifeless in the void, but it hummed with power. The team landed and entered silently, weapons drawn. The interior was dark, corridors echoing with the hum of machinery. Sensors show heavy activity in the central chamber, whispered one soldier. "We need to move carefully." They advanced, alert to every sound, every shadow. Then they saw it: plans, files, and holographic displays showing the enemy's next moves. Earth itself was the target. The enemy intended a massive strike, one that could destroy cities and cripple humanity's defenses. Mara's hands shook slightly as she copied the data. "We have it," she whispered. "This proves the enemy is planning a direct attack on Earth. We need to return immediately." But alarms blared. The enemy had detected them. Red lights flashed, and the corridors filled with armed guards. The team fired back, their weapons precise and deadly, but they were outnumbered. "Split up." Eric's voice came through encrypted channels. "Take the data and escape. Rendezvous at the extraction point." The team raced through twisting corridors, lasers cutting past them. One member dove to protect the others, buying precious seconds before being forced back by overwhelming fire. They reached the hangar where their ships waited, engines ready. Mara launched the lead ship, weaving through enemy fire. The team followed, retreating into the void. Enemy ships pursued them, but the humans were determined and clever. Using asteroid fields and tight maneuvers, they evaded the attackers. "Almost there," Mara said, voice tense. "Just a few more minutes and we're safe." Finally, the team returned to human space, the stolen data secure. Relief washed over them, but there was no celebration. The enemy's plan was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Humanity had survived another mission, but now the stakes were higher than ever. Eric examined the data. His face was grim. "They're planning a strike on Earth itself. We cannot wait. We need to prepare the fleet, and we need to strike first if we want any chance of survival." The crew worked quickly, analyzing enemy strategies, preparing defenses, and repairing ships. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and this time would be no different. Courage, intelligence, and unity would be their weapons. As the stars stretched endlessly around them, Eric knew that the next move would decide the fate of millions. Humanity had survived so far, but the war was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, the enemy waited, preparing for their own assault. And humanity would meet it head-on, ready to fight and survive. In the quiet moments, the fleet stood ready, engines glowing softly, weapons primed. Eric looked out at the endless stars, thinking of the millions depending on them. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were unbreakable in spirit. And for the first time in this campaign, the humans weren't just reacting. They were planning, striking, and proving that even the darkest threat could be met with courage, strategy, and determination. The war had shifted. The humans were no longer just defenders. They were hunters. And the galaxy would soon know that humanity fought not just to survive, but to dominate. The human fleet gathered near the edge of the system, engines glowing softly in the black void. Commander Eric stood on the bridge, staring at the stars. The stolen enemy data had revealed their plan, a massive assault on Earth. Humanity could not wait. Every ship, every fighter, every soldier had to be ready. "Sir, fleet readiness at 95%, reported Lieutenant Mara. "Repairs almost complete. Weapons online." "Good," Eric replied. His voice was calm, but his mind raced. "Prepare for the counterattack. We go on the offensive first. We strike them before they reach Earth. Surprise is our best weapon." The fleet's ships formed tight formations, sleek and silver against the darkness. Humans had few numbers compared to the enemy, but what they lacked in size, they made up for in ingenuity and courage. Every ship had a role, every pilot knew the plan, and every crew member understood the risk. "Enemy fleet approaching from 3 vectors, said a young officer. "They think we're weak, but they don't know we've learned their strategies." Eric's eyes narrowed. "Exactly. They underestimate us. And that will be their mistake." The enemy ships moved like a dark storm, massive vessels cutting through space. Their energy beams lit the void as they approached, aiming to destroy anything in their path. Humans held their positions, engines humming, weapons charged, waiting for the perfect moment. Wait for my signal, Eric ordered. We hit all at once. No hesitation. The minutes stretched, tension building. Every crew member held their breath, eyes scanning the darkness. The enemy was close now, their fleet larger than the human mind could imagine. Yet, humans had a secret advantage: the knowledge of their weaknesses and the courage to use it. Mark! Eric shouted. Phase disruptors fired, lasers streaked through space, and the human fleet surged forward like a tidal wave. Enemy shields faltered, massive ships shook violently, and explosions lit the void in brilliant flashes. The humans moved with precision, striking at every weak point the enemy had. Amid the chaos, small squadrons darted between the larger vessels. Pilots dodged beams and lasers, firing with deadly accuracy. Every human ship was a weapon, every crew member a force to be reckoned with. Enemy formation breaking apart. Mara shouted, pointing at the holographic map. They didn't expect this level of coordination. Eric's heart raced. Humans were not just surviving, they were dominating. The enemy faltered, trying to regroup, but it was too late. Humans had learned their patterns, anticipated their moves, and struck where it hurt most. One enemy cruiser attempted a desperate counterattack, firing a massive beam at the human flagship. Eric's hands flew over the controls. Divert power to shields. Full evasive maneuvers. The ship shuddered, but survived, sparks flying across the bridge. The crew worked tirelessly, patching systems, rerouting power, keeping the ship alive. The human fleet pressed on. Enemy ships exploded one by one, their formations collapsing. The smaller human vessels used speed and intelligence to strike vulnerable points. Courage and strategy were their greatest weapons, and now they shone brighter than any laser. Sir, enemy flagship is exposed. Mara reported. We can finish it. Eric nodded. All ships, concentrate fire. Make this count. A massive energy blast hit the enemy flagship, shaking it violently. Explosions tore through its hull, and the remaining enemy vessels scattered, fleeing into the darkness of space. Humans had struck first, and their strike had shattered the enemy. The fleet held its ground, engines glowing, weapons ready, as silence returned to space. Ships were damaged, lives lost, but humanity had proven its strength. They had not only defended Earth, they had struck a massive blow to the enemy's fleet. Eric looked out at the stars, exhaustion and pride mixing in his chest. We've won this battle, he said quietly. But the war is not over. We need to rebuild, plan, and be ready for what comes next. The crew cheered softly, relief and pride shining in their eyes. Humanity had survived impossible odds, fought smarter and braver than anyone expected. They were small, fragile, yet unbreakable in spirit. Somewhere in the darkness, the enemy would regroup. But they would now know one truth: humans do not surrender, they do not fear, and they fight back with unmatched courage and cunning. Eric turned to his crew. Prepare for the next phase. We've shown them what humanity is capable of. And we will not stop. We will protect Earth, no matter the cost. The fleet's engines glowed softly in the blackness of space, a river of silver light against the void. Humanity had won a decisive victory, but they remained vigilant. The stars watched silently, witnesses to the courage, intelligence, and unyielding spirit of humans, a species that refused to bow to any enemy. The battlefield stretched endlessly, silent and black, but Commander Eric knew the calm was temporary. The enemy fleet had scattered, but intelligence suggested they were regrouping, preparing for a final strike against Earth. Humanity had won a decisive battle, but the war was far from over. Sir, we've located the enemy's main command vessel, Lieutenant Mara reported. It's vulnerable. If we strike now, we could destroy the fleet before they reorganize. Eric's eyes narrowed. Good. Prepare the surprise weapon. All ships, follow my lead. We end this now, with precision. The human fleet moved into formation. Engines glowed brightly, lights reflecting off sleek hulls. Humans had few ships compared to the enemy, but they had something greater: cunning, bravery, and an unyielding will to survive. Every ship, every fighter, every crew member knew their role. There was no room for error. "Phase disruptors ready," Mara said. Her voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the tension. "Targeting systems are locked on." Eric nodded. "All units, fire on my mark. Strike together. Maximum power." The moment stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Then Eric gave the command. Bright beams of energy erupted from the fleet, hitting enemy shields with precision. The command vessel shook violently, sparks and explosions tearing through its hull. Smaller human fighters darted through the chaos, striking enemy ships at vulnerable points. Explosions lit up the void like fireworks, and the enemy fleet faltered. Ships collided, shields failed, and massive explosions echoed silently in the blackness of space. "Enemy flagship destroyed," a crew member shouted. Cheers erupted across the human fleet, but Eric did not allow himself to relax. He knew the enemy was cunning. There could be hidden forces or traps. Even as humans celebrated small victories, the main strike continued. Phase disruptors destabilized enemy shields, human ships pressed forward, and every weapon fired with deadly accuracy. One by one, enemy vessels were destroyed without warning. The humans, though smaller and fewer, had turned the battle into a complete rout. Amid the destruction, Mara pointed to a cluster of enemy ships trying to escape. "Sir, they're attempting to flee. Shall we pursue?" Eric thought for a moment. "No. We focus on neutralizing the main threat first. Let the rest scatter. Our priority is victory, not a chase." Explosions rocked the battlefield as the human fleet advanced, a river of silver light cutting through darkness. Enemy ships tried to regroup, but it was too late. Their formation was broken, their morale shattered, their defenses failing. Humans struck with precision, courage, and intelligence, the combination the enemy had never anticipated. In the middle of the chaos, Eric saw a small human fighter take down a massive cruiser. He smiled slightly. Humans were fragile, yes, but their spirit was unbreakable. Bravery and strategy, not sheer size or numbers, won this war. Finally, the enemy fleet was in complete disarray. Fires burned on their ships, signals went dark, and the void was filled with the wreckage of their once mighty vessels. Humanity had achieved what many thought impossible: total domination of the battlefield, the enemy destroyed without warning. The human fleet held position, engines humming, weapons still primed. They had won, but the cost was clear. Ships were damaged, crews exhausted, lives lost. Yet humanity had survived, fought back, and emerged victorious. Eric looked out at the stars, thinking of Earth and the millions who depended on them. "This is what we do," he said quietly. "We fight. We survive. And we protect our home, no matter the cost." The crew cheered quietly, relief and pride shining in their eyes. Humanity had proven its strength and ingenuity. They were not just survivors, they were hunters, warriors, and protectors. Even in the darkness of space, the human fleet gleamed like silver flames, a symbol of resilience and courage. Somewhere out there, other enemies might watch and learn that humans were not to be underestimated. They were small, yes, but clever. Fragile, yes, but unbreakable in spirit. Commander Eric turned to his crew. "Prepare for repairs and recovery. Celebrate this victory, but remember, we remain vigilant. Humanity will always rise, and the galaxy will always know. Never challenge the courage of a human soul." The stars shone cold and distant, witnesses to the destruction, the victory, and the unyielding spirit of humanity. The enemy fleet was gone, the threat neutralized, but the story of human courage had only begun. And in the silence that followed, the humans knew one truth: against all odds, they had destroyed the enemy without warning, and nothing could break their will. The battlefield was silent now. Wreckage floated in the void, the remnants of the enemy fleet glimmering faintly like broken stars. Commander Eric stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the aftermath. The humans had won. Against impossible odds, they had destroyed the enemy without warning. Yet the victory was bittersweet. "Sir, reports coming in," Lieutenant Mara said softly. Damage to our fleet is extensive. Many ships need immediate repair. Casualties are high, but Earth is safe, for now. Eric nodded, his face grim. We expected losses. We planned for them. Humanity survives, and that is what matters. Around him, the crew moved with quiet determination. Engineers worked to repair systems, pilots checked weapons, medics attended to the wounded. Even in the shadow of destruction, humans were efficient, disciplined, and hopeful. It was this spirit, more than any weapon, that had won the battle. In the observation deck, Eric looked out at the stars. So vast, so silent, and yet so full of possibility. The enemy fleet was gone, but he knew better than to think the threat was over. Somewhere in the darkness, other enemies watched, learned, and planned. Humanity could not afford to be complacent. Mara approached, her expression serious but proud. Sir, the data we recovered shows they're allies in distant systems. If we ignore them, they may strike again. We need to prepare, build stronger defenses, and keep exploring new strategies. Eric placed a hand on the console, thinking deeply. We will. Humanity has survived wars before. We have faced extinction, betrayal, and the void itself. And yet, here we are. We rebuild. We learn. And we fight again when needed. The crew gathered on the deck, quietly celebrating the victory. They shared stories of bravery, of narrow escapes, and of heroic acts that saved lives. Though their voices were low, the pride was unmistakable. Humans had faced annihilation, and they had emerged stronger, smarter, and more united than ever. Outside the fleet, distant stars continued to shine, indifferent to the struggles below. Yet within the humans' hearts burned a fire no enemy could extinguish. Courage, intelligence, and unity, these were their weapons, sharper than lasers, stronger than shields. In the quiet moments, Eric reflected on what had happened. Humans were fragile in body, yes, but unbreakable in spirit. They had fought a fleet far larger and more powerful than themselves, yet they had prevailed. They had destroyed the enemy without warning, proving that courage, strategy, and determination could overcome even the greatest threats. Yet the war had taught another lesson: vigilance was eternal. The galaxy was vast, and unknown dangers waited in the darkness. Humanity could celebrate, but they must also prepare. New enemies, hidden threats, and the endless expanse of space demanded caution, foresight, and relentless effort. Eric turned to his crew. We've won this battle, but the war continues. Humanity's fight is never-ending. We protect our home, our people, and our future. And we do it together, as one fleet, one species, one family. As the ships repaired and reorganized, a quiet hope filled the void. Humans had won, yes, but more importantly, they had learned the greatest truth of all. No matter the enemy, no matter the odds, humanity would survive. They would fight. They would adapt. And they would prevail. In the darkness of space, the fleet glowed like a silver river, a shining testament to human courage and ingenuity. Far beyond the edge of the system, other observers may have watched, wondering at the humans who could turn desperation into triumph. And somewhere, distant threats would take note, realizing that underestimating humans was a fatal mistake. Commander Eric gazed at the stars one last time. We have survived today, he whispered. And we will be ready for whatever comes next. The void was quiet once more, but humanity's spirit burned brighter than ever. They had won, they had survived, and they had proven a truth that no enemy could deny. Humans fight not just to survive, they fight to win. And somewhere deep in the darkness, other forces waited, knowing that when humanity fought, they fought with a courage that no weapon could destroy.